Here we go with our second activity, and this time we're going to be taking another close look at indirect tax and its relationship with elasticities. Now, we touched on this a little bit in online lesson 1, and we're just going to explore it in a bit more detail here, along with some relevant application and examples. So, just a reminder, and we saw this slide, these images, these graphs when we were working through online lesson 1. The diagram on the left, we have perfectly inelastic demand. We have a vertical demand curve. And we can see there that the total tax revenue is indicated by the shaded area, and it's entirely the difference between the two prices, the original price and the new price. The diagram on the left, we have a regular demand curve this time, but something a little bit odd going on. We have perfectly elastic supply, so that's a horizontal supply curve. And again, you can see the tax revenue indicated there. So that's just a reminder of some of the things we looked at back in online lesson 1. Now we're going to move forward with this and start to think a little bit more about the impact of an indirect tax on the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price when we have different types of price elasticity of demand for the good or service that is being taxed. So again, at this point, just pause the video and take some time to fill out that table. With the second column, looking at an example, that's coming up with an example of a good or service that might have the type of demand listed in the scenario column on the left. You then might want to do some quick sketches on a spare piece of paper to see what is likely to happen if you impose an indirect tax and shift the supply curve up on the equilibrium quantity and the equilibrium price. It'll probably take you a good 5 minutes or so to work through this, so just pause that video right there on your screen and then restart it when you want to take a look at our answers to just compare them with yours. Here goes. Let's take a look at some of our suggested answers. Don't forget that you might have decided to choose different examples to ours. That is absolutely fine. You might just want to add our examples to your own table so that you have a range of examples to use in an exam. So there is our suggested answers on the screen there for you. Starting with that first row, highly price inelastic demand. We've chosen cigarettes. Again, just maybe stop to think for a moment to yourself about why we might have suggested cigarettes in terms of habitual purchase, level of addiction, for example. And what you should have noticed is that the indirect tax causes a small fall in quantity and a relatively large rise in the market price. If, however, we swap and think about highly price elastic demand, then relevant examples there would be things where there's plenty of substitutes and choice in the market, things not really bought due to addiction. I've gone for a packet of biscuits. Clearly that's quite personal. Some people cannot get through their day without their chocolate digestive biscuit. You probably have teachers like that at school who have some odd habits in terms of what they choose to eat or drink during the day. And what we have here when we look at the impact of the indirect tax is a large fall in quantity and this time a very small rise in the market price. The two at the bottom there, perfectly inelastic demand, that's the vertical demand curve like we looked at in that previous slide, and perfectly elastic demand, these are slightly more niche topics. So just take a moment to just pause and read through our suggested answers. Now, when we want to think about applying it to real world problems, on the screen there you have 5 examples of goods or services which attract an indirect tax in the UK. So they have an indirect tax levied on each of those products. Your first task, and again just take some time to stop and think about this, what do you notice about the likely price elasticity of demand of the goods and services listed below? Just take a few moments to think about what that might be and maybe just jot down a justification for that as well. When you've done that, here's just a little thinking task. You might want to write down a few brief notes, a couple of sentences on this. How effective are indirect taxes in tackling the market failures associated with some of these goods or services? We're not going to look at this in any great detail in this online lesson video, but that might be the kind of thing that you want to just stop and think about and perhaps submit something to your teacher at school or college to get their views.